Staff Sergeant Maria Rodriguez struggled to properly insert a magazine into her M4 carbine at Fort Jackson's weapons training facility, her hands shaking as 24 basic training recruits watched their instructor fumble with equipment she was supposed to master at 1 p.m. The South Carolina heat was oppressive, but Maria's perspiration came more from anxiety than temperature as she attempted to demonstrate basic rifle operations that should have been as natural as breathing. Which city are you watching from? Share it in the comments. Maybe someone else from your city is here too. And if you believe heroes can appear in the most unexpected ways, hit subscribe and give this video a like. Drill Sergeant First Class Robert Thompson observed Maria's struggles with barely concealed frustration. In his 16 years of training Army recruits, he had never encountered a weapons instructor who appeared to lack fundamental competence with the very equipment she was assigned to teach. The sight of Maria dropping magazines and fumbling with safety mechanisms was professionally embarrassing for the entire training cadre. Rodriguez, Drill Sergeant Thompson called out, his voice carrying the sharp edge of professional embarrassment. These recruits need to see proper weapons handling demonstrated by someone who actually knows what they're doing. This is the third time this week you've struggled with basic magazine insertion. Maria finally managed to seat the magazine after her fourth attempt, her face flushed with humiliation as recruits exchanged glances that ranged from confusion to barely suppressed amusement. She knew exactly what everyone thought of her: incompetent, possibly dangerous, and definitely unsuitable for training soldiers who would depend on these skills in combat situations. But what none of them knew was that Maria Rodriguez had once been Sergeant First Class Maria Santos, 1st Special Forces Operational Detachment-Delta, with classified direct action missions and precision shooting records that would make her current struggles seem like an elaborate deception. The truth was buried in psychological evaluations and identity protection protocols that required clearance levels exceeding those of most generals. Private Williams, one of the more observant recruits in Maria's training class, had been watching her struggles for weeks with growing concern. "Staff Sergeant," he said, raising his hand with obvious skepticism, "maybe we could just read the manual instead of watching demonstrations." The suggestion was disrespectful, but reflected legitimate concerns shared by most of the recruits about learning marksmanship from an instructor who appeared to struggle with basic weapon handling. Maria had become a source of doubt rather than confidence among soldiers who needed to develop trust in their training. "Today we're covering basic rifle marksmanship," Maria announced to her class, her voice lacking the confidence that should characterize military instruction. "We'll start with proper shooting positions and sight alignment." Private Martinez whispered to his battle buddy loud enough for others to hear. "How is she going to teach us shooting when she can't even load her rifle without dropping the magazine?" The comment reflected a growing morale problem among Maria's students, who were beginning to doubt whether they were receiving adequate preparation for combat situations they might face after completing basic training. Drill Sergeant Thompson had been receiving complaints from other drill sergeants about the quality of weapons instruction that Maria's recruits were receiving compared to other training platoons. The performance gap was becoming significant enough to affect overall training effectiveness. "Rodriguez," Thompson said privately, as the recruits prepared their equipment, "I've been getting reports that your students are underperforming compared to other platoons in weapons proficiency. Command is starting to ask questions about your instruction methods." Maria felt the weight of professional failure settling on her shoulders. She knew her performance issues were affecting not just her own career, but the combat readiness of soldiers who would soon deploy to potentially hostile environments. "I understand, Drill Sergeant. I'm working on improving my demonstration techniques." Thompson studied Maria's face, looking for some explanation of how someone could possess theoretical knowledge about weapons systems while appearing to lack practical competence. "Rodriguez, your classroom instruction is actually excellent. You understand ballistics and safety protocols better than most senior instructors, but you can't demonstrate the skills you're teaching." The truth was that Maria's apparent incompetence with routine weapons training was actually a complex trauma response that made peacetime shooting exercises psychologically triggering. Every time she handled weapons in training environments, her mind returned to a compound in Somalia, where precision shooting had accomplished the mission, but created psychological associations that made routine training feel overwhelming. The afternoon live-fire exercise was designed to give recruits their first experience with actual shooting under controlled conditions. Maria was responsible for supervising 24 recruits as they engaged targets at various distances, ensuring safety while providing instruction. "Listen up, recruits," Drill Sergeant Thompson announced before the exercise began. "You'll be firing under the supervision of Staff Sergeant Rodriguez and myself. Follow all safety protocols and remember that everything you learn here could save your life in combat." The irony wasn't lost on anyone present. Her role as safety supervisor was questionable, given her apparent struggles with basic weapons handling, but training schedules required her participation regardless of performance concerns. Private Johnson approached her position with obvious reluctance. "Staff Sergeant, I'm having trouble with my sight alignment. Could you show me the correct technique?" Maria attempted to demonstrate proper sight picture, but her hands were trembling in ways that made precise instruction nearly impossible. Her explanation was technically correct, but her physical demonstration lacked the confidence that recruits needed to see. "Johnson, the key is to line up your front and rear sights with equal light gaps on both sides," Maria explained, trying to control the shaking in her voice. "Your sight picture should be clear and consistent for every shot." Johnson watched Maria's demonstration with obvious concern. "Staff Sergeant, are you feeling okay? Your hands are shaking pretty badly." The question was well-intentioned, but professionally devastating. Recruits shouldn't need to worry about their instructor's physical condition during weapons training, and Maria's visible anxiety was undermining confidence in her ability to provide effective instruction. The live fire exercise began routinely, with recruits engaging targets at 50 meters under close supervision. Maria moved between firing positions, attempting to provide guidance, despite her obvious discomfort with the weapon's noise and tactical environment. But 20 minutes into the exercise, a mechanical failure in one of the target systems created a dangerous situation that would reveal capabilities that Maria had been concealing for months. Private Martinez's target mechanism malfunctioned during his firing sequence, causing the target to fall unexpectedly and creating confusion about whether his position was clear for continued firing. In the confusion, Private Johnson continued shooting at his adjacent position, but his rounds began impacting dangerously close to Martinez's location. "Cease fire! Cease fire!" Drill Sergeant Thompson shouted as he realized that Johnson was unknowingly engaging a target area where Martinez was potentially exposed due to the equipment malfunction. But the ceasefire command wasn't heard clearly over the noise of multiple weapons firing simultaneously, and Johnson continued his engagement sequence, placing Martinez in immediate danger from friendly fire that could result in serious casualties. That's when Maria Rodriguez transformed completely, revealing capabilities that shocked everyone who had been watching her struggle with basic weapons handling for months. Without hesitation, Maria sprinted toward Johnson's firing position with tactical movement that demonstrated extensive training in combat operations. Her approach was rapid but controlled, showing none of the uncertainty that had characterized her previous performance. "Johnson, cease fire immediately!" Maria commanded with authority that cut through the range noise like a blade. Her voice carried the unmistakable tone of someone accustomed to giving orders in life-or-death situations. Johnson, startled by the urgency in Maria's voice, immediately stopped firing and looked up from his rifle scope. "Staff Sergeant, what's wrong?" Maria was already moving toward Martinez's position to assess his safety status. Her movements fluid and professional in ways that suggested extensive experience with tactical operations under stress. "Martinez, report your status immediately," Maria called out as she approached his position with tactical awareness that demonstrated advanced combat training. "I'm okay, Staff Sergeant," Martinez replied from behind cover. "The target fell over, and I wasn't sure if it was safe to continue firing. I could hear rounds impacting near my position." Maria quickly assessed the tactical situation with analytical skills that demonstrated advanced military training far beyond what was required for basic weapons instruction. Her rapid response had prevented what could have been a serious friendly fire incident. Drill Sergeant Thompson approached Maria as she was securing the range, his expression showing amazement at the transformation he had just witnessed. "Rodriguez, that was outstanding situational awareness and crisis management. Where did that come from?" Maria looked at Thompson with an expression that was no longer uncertain but calm and professional. "Drill Sergeant, I have some experience with weapons safety in challenging environments. Thompson was studying Maria with new interest. Rodriguez, you just demonstrated tactical movement and crisis response that would challenge experienced infantry NCOs. That's not standard weapons instructor training. Maria realized that her instinctive response to the emergency had revealed capabilities she had been concealing for months, but protecting fellow soldiers took priority over maintaining any cover about her background. Drill Sergeant, I have training and experience that goes beyond what's shown in my current assignment record. As the training day concluded and equipment was being secured, Maria's gear bag caught on a piece of range equipment and spilled its contents across the ground. Among the scattered items was something that made every person present stop and stare in complete amazement. A Congressional Medal of Honor, still in its presentation case, lay among Maria's personal effects. The distinctive blue ribbon and star-shaped medal were unmistakable, representing the highest military decoration for valor in combat. "Holy shit," whispered Private Johnson, staring at the medal with awe. "Staff Sergeant, is that real?" Maria quickly gathered her scattered equipment, but the damage was done. Every recruit and instructor present had seen the Medal of Honor, and the implications were staggering. Drill Sergeant Thompson approached Maria with an expression of complete confusion. "Rodriguez, that medal belongs to you?" Maria held the presentation case with obvious reluctance. Drill Sergeant, yes. It was awarded for actions during classified operations. Thompson was processing the revelation that his supposedly incompetent weapons instructor was actually a Congressional Medal of Honor recipient. Rodriguez, Medal of Honor recipients don't get assigned to basic training instructor duties unless there are extraordinary circumstances involved. What's your real story? Maria realized that maintaining her cover was no longer possible. Drill Sergeant, I can't discuss the specific operations, but I was awarded the medal for actions during special operations missions. The conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Colonel Patricia Hayes, the commanding officer of Fort Jackson's training brigade, who had been notified about the Medal of Honor discovery. "Staff Sergeant Rodriguez," Colonel Hayes said, studying Maria with new respect. "I think we need to have a very different conversation about your background." 2 hours later, Maria found herself in Colonel Hayes' office, along with Drill Sergeant Thompson and a civilian man who had introduced himself as Mr. Anderson from the Department of Defense Special Access Programs. "Staff Sergeant Rodriguez," Colonel Hayes began, studying a file with obvious classification markings. "Your Congressional Medal of Honor and your performance during today's emergency have raised questions about your actual background." Maria sat at attention. "Yes, ma'am." Mr. Anderson opened a file folder containing documents that Maria recognized. "Maria, your Congressional Medal of Honor was awarded for actions during a hostage rescue operation in Somalia, where you single-handedly eliminated 12 enemy combatants and saved 4 American hostages." Colonel Hayes was impressed despite her confusion. "Rodriguez, your actual service record includes 3 years with 1st Special Forces Operational Detachment-Delta and multiple classified missions. Why are you assigned to basic training instruction?" Maria chose her words carefully. "Ma'am, I'm participating in a psychological recovery program designed to help special operations personnel process combat trauma while transitioning to conventional assignments." Mr. Anderson nodded. "Maria, your weapons handling difficulties are related to post-traumatic stress that makes training environments triggering, while your tactical capabilities remain intact during actual emergencies." Colonel Hayes considered this explanation. "Rodriguez, are you saying that your struggles with basic instruction are part of therapeutic treatment rather than actual skill deficiency?" "Yes, ma'am. The recovery program requires me to work through trauma responses in safe environments while maintaining readiness for genuine emergencies." Mr. Anderson leaned forward. "Maria, today's crisis response proved that your tactical skills are fully operational and that you're ready for assignments that make better use of your capabilities." Colonel Hayes stood up. "Rodriguez, what kind of assignments are we discussing?" "Ma'am," Mr. Anderson replied, "Maria will be assigned to advanced tactical instruction for special operations candidates, where her Delta Force experience can benefit soldiers who need training from someone with actual combat experience." Maria felt relief mixed with anticipation. "Sir, will I continue working with basic training recruits?" Mr. Anderson smiled. Maria, you'll be teaching advanced combat skills to experienced soldiers. Your Medal of Honor and Delta Force background make you uniquely qualified for our most demanding training programs. 3 months later, Staff Sergeant Maria Rodriguez stood before a class of 12 Special Forces candidates at Fort Jackson's Advanced Combat Training Facility, wearing the Congressional Medal of Honor and the instructor badge that marked her as qualified for the Army's most elite programs. Drill Sergeant Thompson, who had requested assignment as her assistant instructor, watched as Maria demonstrated tactical techniques that incorporated lessons learned from actual Delta Force operations. Staff Sergeant Rodriguez, your students are achieving tactical proficiency that exceeds anything we've seen in conventional training programs. Maria smiled, watching her students apply combat-proven techniques that she could finally share without compromising her recovery process. Drill Sergeant, I'm teaching them methods that work when lives depend on split-second decisions. Thompson nodded approvingly. Rodriguez, you've taught all of us something important about not judging soldiers based on training performance that might not reflect their actual capabilities. As Maria watched her students continue their training, she reflected on the extraordinary journey that had brought her to this point. She had spent 7 long months accepting professional humiliation and enduring whispered doubts, while processing combat trauma that made routine training feel psychologically threatening, when actually she possessed tactical capabilities that exceeded those of any instructor at Fort Jackson. The recovery process had been more challenging than any mission she had undertaken with Delta Force. Learning to separate peaceful training environments from combat memories required patience, understanding, and the support of medical professionals who specialized in helping special operations personnel transition back to conventional military service. Her phone buzzed with a heartwarming message from one of her former basic training recruits. Staff Sergeant, heard about your new assignment and your Medal of Honor. Thank you for keeping us safe even when we didn't understand what you were going through. You're a real hero. Maria touched the Congressional Medal of Honor on her uniform, no longer hidden shamefully in a gear bag, but displayed proudly as recognition of service and sacrifice that had never been diminished by the challenges of trauma recovery and psychological healing. The woman who had been called hopeless with rifles had revealed herself as one of the most decorated warriors in American military history, proving that healing from combat trauma takes time, courage, and understanding, and that the greatest heroes sometimes need space and support to rediscover their strength and return to meaningful service.